Welcome to the Understanding Projects podcast. My discussion today is with Matthew Black. Matthew has a great deal of experience in systems engineering and development in a variety of industries, including defense, aerospace, and financial services. He has combined Agile tools with classical waterfall delivery methods so that what is delivered uses the best tools and processes to meet the needs of the business partners and clients. This then was the basis for our conversation. That is, the environment where both Agile and waterfall projects are practiced. We talk about how these two worlds may coexist and when it's necessary to bend some of the processes. We also talk about his being a self-proclaimed data guy and how being technically curious can help organize information effectively for the project. Here is my discussion with Matthew Black. So I understand that you have had experience in your past, both working on waterfall projects and Agile projects, and you have some thoughts around how they can interact and how they, complement each other. It's something that I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out is how do these two paradigms, or two methodologies, frameworks coexist, in an organization. So, I just wanted to kick it off with that. So that how do you view that question, or how have you approached it in the past?
That's a great question. I find that a lot of companies, as they're trying to take on agile methodologies like Scrum or Kanban, those are the two I have experience with, that they try to make that big change all at once. They don't try and do it incrementally. And every time they try and do that change, they tend to fail. Or I'll use Jira as an example. They'll give Jira to their teams and say, great, you're agile now, and then find that it really doesn't work. So I found that there is a need to kind of blend agile methodologies and waterfall for companies that are in that transition, or maybe that's just a better fit. Maybe it's not worth their time and money to go completely agile. Maybe a hybrid model works. And one advantage of that is that people who are familiar with waterfall don't completely feel alienated. And eventually, if they learn to love agile methodologies like myself, maybe they'll make that transition. But I find it's a great tool for a company that's trying to transition or trying to figure out, is agile right for me? This is a great baby step.
Right. The comment that you made, or the way we're going to implement Agile is here's Jira, is something that I find I've found that over time of even people representing the broader project management as equal to MS project. And it isn't, it's not. Project management, the broader overall discipline is so much more than a software tool. If you boil it down to a software tool, you're just talking about an implementation of one aspect of it, and usually the way I respond to that and say, it's usually in the context of learning project management. Well, it's an MS project course. And I said, well, no, it's more than that. It's like, that'd be like saying, if you want to learn how to write, just learn Word and that'll make you a writer. Well, no, that'll teach you how to enter words into, a system. That's what that is. So I get that completely. So, okay, so on that, you're saying, the thoughts are there are organizations that they're either on their way to moving from waterfall to Agile, or maybe they're just the best solution for them is to have a hybrid, a hybrid model of some Agile stuff, but with some waterfall techniques and so on. So how do you see that hybrid working? Like, what's your thoughts around that?
Well, there's two things. There's the hybrid with the tools, right? So you're managing the project in a hybrid way. But then there's also, well, you might have aspects of the company that will remain waterfall. And maybe they'll have agile teams that offer software as a service. That where you'll have a persistent teams that will maintain software that's in production, almost like operations. But in this case, they would be developing new features and handing it off to operations. But my experience has been really with the truly a hybrid, where you have business wanting it to be waterfall, you have IT wanting to be agile, and then how do you blend the two?
Right.
But definitely just giving IT a tool and saying, here, now you're agile, without recognizing the limitations or defining some run rules, it is not successful. So one of the things I think it's Atlassian has this great little quote that says, only project managers read Gantt charts. So that's what was one of their philosophies when they created Jira. So the team, when you empower the team and they start using the tool, they learn how to use the tool, and they start setting due dates, and you start defining, if you're working Scrum and you have your sprints, and the team starts recognizing how much work they can take on, they can almost create their own calendar. But that doesn't help the business when the business is trying to say, well, I need to know, I need a roadmap. I'm trying to plan out features that haven't even made it into your sprint yet, that we're still talking about in business development. So on their side, they need some like a Gantt chart, something a little more MS project-like. So as the Scrum Master, you almost need to have both skills. You need to have your waterfall PMing skills, but you also have to have the ability to coach your Scrum team, or if you're working in a Kanban team, just the ability to govern your Kanban project, but really let your team members work on their own. Hopefully that sort of answers your question a bit.
Well, but how does that, like, when the rubber meets the road, you've got your Scrum or your Kanban team that they are managing their sprints, if it's Scrum, and so they're 2 weeks at a time, or 3 weeks, or whatever the side, that's their view is that long. But you have the business, whether it's the operations, or a project that is perhaps related to, but is not being run in Agile, and they want to know, like you said, I want the Gantt chart. I want to know where you are going to be there on May 1st. Where will you have those features? Because I want to tell our customers about it, and we need to tell them now. We need to start to tell them now, not not April 21st. We need to tell them now. How do you, like, that to me seems one of the tension points between the two methodologies. So what do you do in that case? What is the approach to handling that? Or is that just like there's just a lot of stuff going back and forth, between the two camps, if you will?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going back and forth for sure, especially estimates, which, if you're working in Scrum or Kanban methodologies, you just kind of get rid of the estimates. You don't say, hey, to develop this whole feature, it's going to take me, 100 days plus or minus 10%. And here's all my contingencies for my risks and stuff. That you're not supposed to do that if you're agile, but you end up doing something similar to that. So what you can do is you can still have your risk register, and you can still have a high level plan, which the business really needs. But what you can do is you can take that high level plan and leverage a tool like Jira, for example. And whether you're working Scrum or Kanban, you can now take your high level plan and time box that into sprints, and use the tool just for time tracking capabilities. So the team's not, you ignore all the metrics, you ignore all the story pointing, you don't bother doing that, or you repurpose it to estimate for days. You don't worry about the metrics, you don't worry about moving stuff in and out of sprints. You simply use it to say, here's 2 weeks worth of activity, or you say, forget about 2 weeks, here's 5 weeks worth of activity. This sprint's going to last for 5 weeks, and here's everything we're going to do. And that lines up with the high level schedule. And then towards the end, as a PM slash Agile master, because you could be using this for Kanban as well. Because again, with Jira, whether you're operating Kanban or Scrum, you can use the tool. You can use either aspects of the tool, either purely Scrum, purely Kanban, or a hybrid. And I can then run the tool and say, how much work do we have left? So I can generate that kind of percent complete that the business likes to see, without the team having to sit through sprint reviews and say, well, I didn't finish this, and let's talk to the program or product owner about pushing scope into the next sprint. You don't have to worry about any of that. Or Kanban, it's always continuous, right? So, but continuous is we're going to get it done when we get it done. Well, no, we're going to kind of try and time box your activities. And when you start missing some of these deadlines that we've defined with sprints of varying lengths, it doesn't always have to be the same length now. You can get that percent complete. You can get that progress that business likes to see with waterfall by leveraging the tool in a different way.
Right. So you're saying you're kind of bending the methodology a little bit, right?
Yes.
Like you're because of business need. Like if we were in a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
and we could say, okay, we're going to run this process, this agile processes, and not, quote, worry. Like we'll kind of let you, like at the end of each sprint, we'll say, here we are, this is shippable,
Mm-hmm.
hooray. And then here we are, this is shippable, hooray. That if you can do that without anyone asking the question, if you could cut off the questions to say, if somebody said, so when are we, no, we're not going to talk about that. If you could control that, it would be perfect, right? You do, but the world being in it as it is, stakeholders will want to know, yeah, but kind of can you give me a little bit of a high level picture here? So I guess what I'm hearing from this is that, if we could term agile as being a little more bottom up, a little bit more, each sprint we pick from the product log and so on, and move forward that way. You're sort of saying, and perhaps is what you meant, or what you were saying with the Scrum Master having both, you know, Scrum knowledge and waterfall knowledge, is to be able to sort of do the top-down view, to say, okay, this is going to be, I'm thinking we're going to have 5 sprints here. This is probably what we're going to do in each one. So a reasonable person would say, in five sprints times the duration, at that point we should be here, and that is then the Gantt chart. You could view that as a Gantt chart. Then each
Yeah.
sprint is a a bar on our Gantt chart, and as you're going, you'd be going, okay, and we're moving a little behind. We're a little slower than what I thought. We'll have to message that out. That'll be a change then to our little Gantt chart. We'll start to push to the right, which is, it's not the first project that would have ever happened in. So
Right. It wouldn't be the first project.
yeah. So is
and
that sort of what you're saying, or
yeah.
a variation?
No, that is sort of what I'm saying. It's basically, you can leverage these tools, so the team can be working away how they normally would be, using a different tool to report, for example, Jira, and making sure that they put the ownership on them. You provide your status in the tool with these. They take more ownership for that, and then as your PM Scrum Master, you put your hat on and say, okay, I can now pull that status and I can map that to my high level plan. So you're still doing this PM work where you're still doing estimating, which you shouldn't be doing if you're doing Scrum or Kanban. It's just, here's how much work we can typically get done. It'll be done on this date, versus, oh, well, we need these features done in a month and a half regardless. Okay, well, I'm going to have to increase the size of my team.
Right.
So you kind of, you bend the rules. I like how you put that. You bend the rules.
Yeah. Does this mean that the Scrum Master PM, which is, there's no such official role as far as I can.
Official role. Yeah.
Well, in the user's guides that you get for these things, but in real life, I'm sure they're all over the place. Did they? It just went out of my head. Oh shoot! I think I lost the train of thought. So do they then need? Oh, I know. Do they then need to influence the content of the sprint? Like in pure just talking about Scrum for a moment,
Sure.
in pure, sort of the Scrum canon,
Mhm.
the Scrum Master doesn't say anything about what's in it. That's, the development team selects the items and so on. Does the Scrum Master PM need to put his or her thumb on the scale a little bit and say, you really want to put this one in because I kind of told somebody about that. So is that
Ye-
part of the bending that's taking place?
Yeah, a little bit as well. As you know, with Scrum team, you have a dedicated product owner,
Yep.
and they would then rank all the features, and the team would pull from the top of the backlog and say, okay, we're going to do the most important features first, and the product owner would reorganize the backlog before the sprint, and the team would say, yes, I can take on this work during the sprint. And you typically have a 2-week sprint up to 4 weeks, as short as a week. But and then you've delivered something at the end, whether it's not to production, but it could be here's a prototype, and then you demonstrate that to the business.
So, in terms of this role, so what we're just to to back up for a moment. So
Yeah,
we have an environment where the agile team is aware of the waterfall world. The waterfall world is aware of the Scrum world, and
hmm
they're sort of staying in sync with each other. There's somebody bridging the gap. Like I know
yeah,
in most things in business that I've been in, there's somebody whose role is to be the interpreter, the translator, but between areas. That's something I used to do back in the day of be the translator between the IT development team and the business. I would speak both languages, and it sounds like that's something that's a role here, is somebody who can speak waterfall,
yes.
or business, and speak agile. And I guess given that, do you see animosity between the two groups? Like, do they get along, or is it an uneasy tension?
Um, I think in theory it can get along. But I think that the problems happen when you have one either side that hasn't fully bought into it. So if one side is, hey, we've been working for waterfall, I'm not convinced that anything agile is going to work. Or I gave a team that Jira tool, for example, months ago, and it's been more complicated than beneficial. So clearly agile doesn't work.
Right.
Right. So as this person that's kind of bridging the role, you've got your, Scrum Master hat on, for example, where you're advocating for these methodologies in the company. But when you're in that transition, you're going to have people that are going to resist that and possibly drag their feet a little bit and create problems.
Right.
And it's not necessarily, and it could be because they just don't agree with it, but more often than not, they're just confused and they might not
Right.
want to admit it.
Right.
So there's definitely some tensions.
So what do you see as what's a project that's, obvious agile, like hands down, why would you do it any differently? What would be your, like, what's a typical project that you would say there's no reason you wouldn't do it agile?
Well, any sort of anything, let's say any sort of software app um, that requires continuous maintenance, but addition of new features. So above operations, hey, we want to change this font. We want to change how people land on the page. We want to, all these little increments that are really easy to do. Agile is a perfect fit for that.
Right.
Now, you can use Agile to develop something from scratch. Absolutely. It's just a little more of a stretch for people that have not or who are new to the Agile world, right?
Right.
Oh, what are we going to do in this 2 weeks? We're delivering a piece of paper that's the prototype. What is that? Um, the the other challenge is if you don't have a dedicated product owner. Let's say you have a business sponsor who has 10 other projects that they're sponsoring. It's sometimes very hard to get their time. So you can't, so that could be a red flag and say, okay,
Right.
well, I don't have that dedicated person. This is going to be really almost impossible to operate purely Scrum because I need you every 2 weeks to tell me what's going into to prioritize things on an ongoing basis, hydrate the backlog, as well as be that kind of shield for the team. Like when people want new features, no, they're put it on my list. I'll prioritize it. And when you don't have that, it you get a lot of people shoulder tapping and, hey, let's just change the scope real quick, or the sponsor just doesn't quite fully understand what's going on because they're just so busy. They just kind of said, yeah, that sounds good, without taking the time to really understand the implications of, hey, we're doing these 5 new features. That means X, whatever X happens to be.
I wanted to pick up on where you're saying sometimes a completely new, like blank page application might, you said it's possible in Agile, might be a little difficult. And I almost view that as it's like if we, if we use the metaphor of a project was an airplane or a jet, the
Yeah.
takeoff, the initial lift off the runway might be more waterfall-ish, just to get it
going.
just to get like version, version 1 or the prototype of version 1, just so it's off the ground, and then the course corrections, then Agile takes over.
Yeah, like don't worry about the, how are you going to story point things when you're still trying to figure out what you're going to do. But I think if you left it to just, here's the business case and these people that are creating all the details, and suddenly dump it into the lap of an Agile team and say, there you go, make it. There's going to be a disconnect there, and there's going to be inefficiencies because they weren't part of that upfront, more waterfall decision-making progress. They won't have that history.
So what's the opposite to that question then? What, from your experience, what is the obvious waterfall that you'd say, you could do it perhaps in Agile, but I think the old project life cycle does just fine? Like, what's the slam dunk there?
Okay, well, if you're going to have a team that's not persistent and you need to pull in a bunch of different people of different skill sets, let's say it's a year long, and you need 10 different departments to work on it just at 3 or 4 weeks at a time. Okay, that would tell me that, okay, maybe waterfall's a slightly better approach. If you don't have, as I mentioned, a dedicated product owner or somebody who spends at least half their time focused on your team, that's another red flag. Maybe it's best just to do waterfall. If you don't have, one of the things that Agile assumes is that everybody on your team has the same skill set, and that's, when are you going to have somebody who can design, or from a software world, design, code, and test? In fact, you shouldn't have somebody testing their own code, so that means that there needs to be somebody else is always testing your stuff. So, but when are you going to have a team where everybody has the same skills that are 100% equal? People are always going to have their strengths.
Right.
So if you can't get a team that's close, or live with the fact that you have developers and designers and then testers, but you can't feed enough information or scope into the sprints to keep the developers busy and the testers busy because they're not working on the same things, then maybe you do want to have a waterfall style project. And I don't think there's anything wrong with waterfall. I just think it's and I don't think we should get rid of it. I just think, sometimes it's a project should be waterfall, sometimes it should be Agile, and sometimes you might just want to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, and definitely a lot of the physical types of projects and so on are like, we're talking about the software industry for sure, but there are various other projects where other factors are at work. What do you like doing? Do you enjoy more the Scrum Master role or the project manager role? Is they're like in their pure senses, let's say, like what because those are the two which are probably most comparable, I suppose. They're not the same.
Yeah.
But which do you enjoy?
Oh, Dave, that is a tough question. I really enjoy aspects of both. I'm a numbers guy, so I really like not messing with the budget, but calculating the budget and calculating risk and crunching the numbers, and are we on budget? Are we on time? Like I love generating those reports. That's me. But what I really loved about Agile, especially if you're given the tools, I love Confluence, I love Jira, SharePoint, being able to own those sites and help guide the team, say, hey, here's where we can put our information, here's how we're going to manage our artifacts and our deliverables. I found I had maybe a little more power on the Confluence side on the Agile side. And I had to come up with these kind of neat visual tools to use, which you don't get the same opportunity on waterfall. I mean, you do have dashboards, but they're not quite as fun as some of the new Agile tools.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I have to agree with you. You're a numbers guy, and how'd you refer to it as a data guy? Was that the
Yeah, I just like crunching data and numbers, and yeah.
crunching numbers and so on? And just as an aside, you and I are in process as we speak, collaborating on an Excel based tool for managing projects for students, and I've noticed a really and you've mentioned a really focus on information and data and Excel wizardry as well. So I can affirm this completely. And I've also noticed with yourself um, a desire to play with that type of stuff, to try things out and to do it yourself. And it really struck me as I do think that is a key attribute of somebody that works well either as a project manager or a scrum master, as somebody that's willing to get in and get their fingers, their hands dirty a little bit in terms of the raw data, and that ability to say, hey, I want to play with this and see how this works. And then I can influence the team. I can provide them information, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is a key attribute of both types of roles.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I found that I was learning the tools before the team members were. So I was showing the team, how do you use the tool? How do you best use the tool? Trying to learn new features to make their life easier. Because as a PM or a Scrum Master, or somebody who's just running a Kanban team, that's one thing you can do for your team, is remove the roadblocks. And it's so easy to say, hey, we can use this tool easier, and here's how, and just teach them how to do it. Getting rid of that inefficiency, that's something that you can easily take on. And I think in this day and age, with all these online tools, as a project manager, I think all project managers should know SharePoint over MS Project per se, because setting up that document repository, how are you going to manage your documents, how are you going to manage the information, how are we going to make sure, as a project manager, having those sites, or as a Scrum Master, having all that information created and knowing where to find it, you can validate that everything is being created and being delivered, because ultimately you're accountable for that as a project manager or Scrum Master.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree that and that's what I'm sort of, that's what I'm detecting as well, is that willingness to do that and not shy away from it, and not be willing to just take what the software packages offer. For example, just thinking about MS Project, it has reporting capabilities, but I've always found the stuff it reports is not useful. Like that, in my estimation, okay, here's the budget report. Well, I don't like that budget. It looks ugly. Nobody wants to read that thing.
right.
And so that's where I think a key attribute of the PM/Scrum Master, with different tools, is that willingness to say, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, learn how to use this, you learn how to manipulate data and to structure it and do it, and not be limited by what Jira or Microsoft tell you is you're going to get, and not also sort of say, oh, I better put a request into IT to build me a report. Like, I'm gonna this is way too complicated, so I'll just send it over and get in line, get into the 251st place on their priority list in terms of it being done, but instead saying, this isn't, this isn't rocket science. I can learn Excel, I can learn SharePoint, and do these types of things. That allows you to be able to construct data, to be able to provide interesting information for stakeholders, for your team. And I think that is a key, and that's something that I recognized, in our interactions, is that is a key attribute, and I think it's an important attribute for project managers and Scrum Masters?
Well, one thing, and it's funny you mentioned that about Excel. One thing that I found I used a lot was, um, yeah, there's keeping track of the budget, even on a Scrum team. And you think, okay, you're not supposed to. You have a full-time team. You know how much it's going to cost. But what happens when you have vendor costs? What happens when you have subcontractor costs? Some subcontractors run at different run rules. As soon as you're over 40 hours, and hey, if they are running behind and we need to make up some time, it's time and a half. What happens when you're working if it's a different if it's a different time zone? You might have more holidays, or maybe their weeks are, you have team members that have different hours in the work week. You can set up your budget, but anytime there's overtime or you bought materials, you bought a service, you need to keep track of that like it's a detailed budget. So where does that go when you're Scrum? Who keeps track of that? I guess you could have an accounting team, but what I found was, Scrum Master, you have PM background, just keep track of this and report it, please.
Right.
How much is our vendor cost going to be next month? And you end up creating a detailed budget, even though your core team might more or less be constant.
Right.
Knowing Excel to be able to quickly calculate all that and do the what if scenarios for business is important for the business as well, especially if they're thinking about ramping up the size of the team, or maybe ramping down because, okay, maybe we don't want to invest as much money. How much are we going to spend by the end of the year? What if we get rid of some of our senior resources? How much does it cost if we put in junior resources to do the easy scope for the rest of the year? And they still want those answers. But if you don't have that budget calculated, you can't provide that information for them. So you still need to be able to do it.
Yeah, there is that you're saying that what ifing. If you've got the financial, almost like a financial model that you can then do that what ifing to say, okay, yeah, if we get rid of our, move out our senior engineers onto something else and bring in some intermediate or junior, here's the effect on the overall budget. So it's that financial literacy and also that willingness to do it. I go back to, if you have to outsource this all the time, things are so quick in business. We're trying to be, small agile. If you have to outsource this to somebody else and explain requirements to say, on that Excel spreadsheet, I want it to do this, this, and this, you don't get the turnaround time. So that's where, my mind is, literacy, some level of literacy in Excel as an example is fundamental. And even,
Yes.
I know you're a SharePoint, fan as well. That may be another one to add to the list.
Yeah, and the reason I say SharePoint is because it doesn't have to be SharePoint, but SharePoint-like.
Yeah.
You can have your calendar in there, you can have your announcements, but more importantly, you can put, if you're still creating artifacts in Office products, it gives you that repository. You can have some libraries with revision control turned on, some of them turned off. You can define rules for versioning. You can define workflows to sign off documents. You can do some really cool things. And that's, in this day and age, everybody's working remotely. Hey, you're working off your desktop. Why not just check out that document and work right off the server? And then if, God forbid, you get hit by a bus, whoever runs that site can check that document in. We can see all of your changes.
Right.
So I think that's important. Otherwise, if you just give them a shared network drive and say, have at it, you'll never be able to find anything. And I see that so often, that as a PM, the team just has a network drive and they're creating endless directories, and you can, in 6 months' time, hey, where was that document? Well, I don't know. It's somewhere in this mess.
Right.
SharePoint allows you to structure it a little better. You can still get in that same mess, but you can also add metadata to things, and then Confluence is the next step up. If you know Confluence and the team has access to that, you're actually creating content online. You're not even uploading documents anymore. You're basically creating a wiki site for your project, which is or product, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, no, sounds interesting, and that may be a discussion for another. I'll have you back to talk about that one. But anyways, with that, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Matthew. This has been, an interesting journey through Agile and waterfall, and it is an ongoing, I think many organizations, probably all organizations that are using Agile to some point are wrestling with this. So it's been a great discussion with you on some of the issues and approaches to take.
Oh, thanks, Dave. It was a pleasure chatting with you as usual. And yeah, I'd love to come back and chat more sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Take care.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Matthew Black. Matthew talked a great deal about the worlds of Agile and waterfall projects and demonstrated some of the issues and factors that should be considered. There are also a mention of a number of technical tools, including SharePoint, Jira, Confluence, and of course Excel. Matthew has found these tools to be very helpful. If you like this series of discussions, please consider following Understanding Projects on your favorite podcast player or subscribing on YouTube.